Hello there and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is L24 Midnight News, and coming up next in our news program. Zionist fighter jets have launched several airstrikes in the blockade Gaza Strip, leading to a power outage in some areas. Former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan said he would resume his protest march to Islamabad after recovering from an assassination attempt. Less than 48 hours after the warring parties signed a deal to end two-year conflict, Tigray authorities accused Ethiopia's government on Friday of carrying out a drone strike. As 24-hour curfew takes effect, Russian President Vladimir Putin's call on civilians to evacuate Ukraine's in-battle southern Kherson region ahead of Kiev's anticipated aggression. Hello there and welcome. I'm your host Abdurrahim Kashur, and those were today's top stories. First, Algerian Ambassador Al-Arabi Jakta was successfully elected President of the UN International Civil Service Commission by the United Nations against his candidate of Morocco. The election took place on Friday at the United Nations headquarters in New York. The Algerian ambassador was elected after winning 121 votes, while the Moroccan rival got only 64. Regarding the situation in the occupied Palestine territories, several inhabitants of the city of Nablus were targets of violence raised by the Zionist entity soldiers. Palestinian sources said that several Palestinians who demonstrated in the city of Nablus against Zionist presence in their territory were wounded in the raids. It's worth noting that the Palestinians have been suffering from several days for a fierce Zionist campaign, which is tantamount to an apartheid regime. Still in Asia, Lebanese Army Chief Joseph Aoun issued a warning Thursday of a possible security incidents during the presidential vacuum that started on November 1st after the end of Michel Aoun's mandate. Army chief stated that the country is entering into a period of presidential vacancy, along with the ongoing political tensions could lead to attempts to exploit the situation in order to undermine security.
The country's entry into a period of presidential vacancy, along with the ongoing political tensions, could lead to attempts to exploit the situation in order to undermine security. We are not concerned with these political tensions and do not take sides. Our only concern is to ensure stability and civil peace. We will not allow the exploitation of the situation and the transformation of our nation into an open field for any security incident or suspicious actions.
And from Lebanon to Pakistan, former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan has been shot and slightly wounded in the leg in an attack on his protest march in the country's east. Mariam Zian tackled the story in this report.
The attack on Pakistan's former Prime Minister Imran Khan has drawn international condemnation. Imran Khan has been wounded by gunfire in eastern Pakistan while riding in a truck as part of a massive demonstration to force the government to hold early elections, as he was barred from office last month. He survived the shooting that his party called an assassination attempt. The attack killed one person and injured a dozen, prompting chaotic protests across the country.
3 people decided to kill me, and then it happened. Now I will tell you the details of what happened. That day when I was in the container, all at once there was a burst of bullets. The bullets hit my leg and I fell down. When I fell, the second burst of bullets were fired. There was a burst from one side and another coming from the front. There were 2 people.
A suspect was arrested on Thursday with a 9mm pistol, whereas the Ministry of Information released a video of a confession from an unnamed man who claims he carried the attack alone.
Imran Khan was misleading people, and I could not bear that. That is why I did this. so I killed him. Tried to kill him. I tried my best to kill him. Only Imran Khan. I did not want to kill anyone else.
Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif issued a statement condemning the incident and asked authorities to immediately launch an investigation. Similarly, the Pakistan Army highly condemned the incident. Meanwhile, the US denounced the attack. Thursday's shooting is likely to further an already inflamed situation between Imran Khan and the Pakistani Prime Minister amidst an ongoing difficult economic crisis.
And from Asia to Europe, a 24-hour curfew has been imposed in Kherson city, which makes up part of the 4 regions which Russia has annexed in September. This comes as the Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Friday that civilians in the Kherson region should be evacuated from the conflict zone. Kremlin chief's first acknowledgement of a deteriorating situation in the area.
Now, of course, those living in Kherson should be removed from the zone where the most dangerous actions are taking place, because the civilian population should not suffer from the shelling, from the offensive, counter-offensive, or any other actions connected to the ongoing military activities.
The Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday said the West had hammered historical nonsense into the heads of the people, including the real cause of the World War II and the Soviet Union's role in the victory over Nazi Germany.
How is it possible to say that the Ukrainian front liberated Europe during World War II? That's nonsense. This nonsense is repeated in Europe by very respectable people at first glance. They are hammering this rubbish into the heads of millions of people.
The Pentagon announced Friday that the United States is sending Ukraine more $400 million in military aid and establishing a security assistance headquarters in Germany that will oversee all weapons transfers and military training for Ukraine.
The department is announcing approximately $400 million in additional security assistance for Ukraine under the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, or USAI. The USAI package underscores the continued U.S. commitment to supporting Ukraine by meeting their most urgent requirements, while also building the capacity of Ukraine's armed forces to defend its sovereignty over the long term.
Foreign ministers of wealthiest democracies of the world, or G7, ended the 2-day meeting in the city of Münster, Germany. Mohammed Khatal in this report.
Talks between top diplomats and foreign ministers of the most industrialized democracies wound up on Friday in the German city of Münster. The G7 foreign ministers discussed, among other things, how to deal with protests in Iran, relations with Central Asian nations, and the challenges facing Africa, with their counterparts from Ghana, Kenya, and the African Union as guests, in addition to the thorny issue of food security.
To lift the pressure off those countries around the world, those people around the world who are already experiencing food insecurity and are pushed even closer to famine.
At the end of their 2-day meeting, the diplomats agreed to combine efforts to help Ukraine repair and defend its energy and water infrastructure affected by the Russian military operation. The group of 7 also urged China to abstain from threats and intimidation while expressing their will for cooperation where possible to tackle global challenges including security, health, and climate. Meanwhile, the bloc called on Iran to honor international law, including the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the General Assembly resolution adopted in 1966 and which is in force since 1976.
During his visit to Beijing, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has urged China to use its influence on Russia to stop the war in Ukraine. The trip comes while the two countries are celebrating the 50th anniversary of establishment of relations between Germany and China. Nabil Khazini.
The plane bearing Olaf Scholz, the first to take a European leader to China in 3 years, has landed on Beijing's soil, despite claims that the visit will continue to widen the gap between Berlin and the rest of the Western countries, where critics say that Olaf Scholz is over-relying on China the same way he did with Russia. However, the German Chancellor says that his country doesn't want to decouple from Beijing and that Berlin only seeks cooperation where mutual interest lies.
Insofern ist es gut, dass wir einen ganz intensiven
It's good that we will have a very intensive exchange on all issues we want to and can discuss in regard to our bilateral relations, the possibilities to further intensify economic cooperation as well as, of course, the issues where we pursue different perspectives. That is the goal of a good exchange, and I am delighted that this is possible together here today.
froh, dass das heute jetzt hier miteinander möglich ist.
Chancellor Scholz is already being accused of acting alone in the face of the war in Ukraine. Among the exchanges he had with the Chinese leadership was a request to President Xi Jinping to use Beijing's influence on Russia to put an end to the conflict in Ukraine.
We have all talked about the current Ukraine crisis, and both sides hope that this crisis will end as soon as possible. The situation can be eased, and it really cannot be escalated. Our starting point is to foster peace and promote talks, and we do not want to see world peace and regional stability being impacted, nor do we want to see disturbance in the stability of international industrial and supply chains.
China and Germany are celebrating the fifth decade of relationship between the two countries. However, amid the complex and fluid international landscape, the two countries' ties are currently characterized by considerable differences.
Sweden should step up efforts to fight systematic racism and focus on strategies to restore trust between police and minority groups, said the UN Human Rights Council appointed a group of independent experts on advancing racial justice and equality. The members of the international expert mechanism gathered during their visit to Sweden information on the existing legislative and regulatory measures for tackling racial discrimination. The experts said that they were deeply concerned by Swedish authorities' reluctance to collect the disaggregated by race. Botswana Minister of Foreign Affairs Lumongo Kwapi has reiterated his country's permanent attachment to the right of the Sahrawi people to self-determination and independence. During a ceremony organized by the Botswana government on the occasion of United Nations Day in Gaborone, in collaboration with the UN, Mr. Kwapi affirmed that Botswana supports the Sahrawi people and their just cause. Botswana had earlier called on African countries to speak with one voice in support of Western Sahara's right to freedom and independence and to stand up in solidarity with its people through the competent international organizations and bodies. Less than 48 hours after the warring parties signed a deal to end 2 years of conflict, Tigrayan authorities accused Ethiopia's government on Friday of carrying out a drone strike against civilians. According to Tigray People's Liberation Front, the target of Thursday's attack was the city of Maishwo. This incident was followed by artillery shelling that killed and wounded civilians. It's worth mentioning that Algeria praised Thursday the agreement concluded by the Ethiopian government and Tigray People's Liberation Front to put an end to the fighting in the country, according to a statement by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad. Spokesman for the Somali Ministry of Defense said on Friday that the army killed more than 100 members of the terrorist Al-Shabaab movement in 2 areas of the central province of Hiran. This comes a day after 2 people were killed and 5 others wounded in the road skip bomb explosion that hit a car carrying students in the Dainili area of Mogadishu. Drought has killed a generation of elephants between February and October in Kenyan wildfire reserves. Wildfire has taken a hit as much of East Africa endures its worst drought in 4 decades, and officials says that more than 500,000 people in northern Kenya region of Turkana are facing starvation, mainly due to a lack of rainfall over 4 seasons.
We have lost an entire generation. And if we lose an entire generation and the gestation period takes another 2-3 years, then we are talking about a span of 8 years. So what does that tell us ecologically?
I confirm that different species of wildlife are being affected by the drought, with a total of 14 different species of wildlife being affected between the month of February and October this year.
Climate change activists tried to block a site operated by French oil giant Total Energies on Friday in northern France to call for the end of the use of fossil fuel. The protest comes also after environmental group Greenpeace France accused Total Energies of underreporting emissions for 2019, sparking a debate about its seriousness in the fight against climate change days ahead of the next round of global climate talks.
It's important to do that now, because we're out of time. We need change. The United Nations recently published a report saying that we needed huge change in the way we lead our lives today. So we have run out of time.
Same line of thought, the 27th session of the Conference of the Parties to the UN Framework Convention on the Climate Change will begin this Sunday, 6th of November in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Over 120 heads of state are expected to attend this year's COP27, raising hopes that global leaders will at least give a signal to the most existential crisis facing human race. The theme for COP27 focuses on the urgent need to move from negotiations and planning to implementation. And now for more international news, let's follow this roundup by Marwa.
On Friday, local authorities said that the Peruvian indigenous group will release an estimated 150 tourists. It held for over a day in a protest over alleged government inaction on oil spills in a river. The indigenous group had held the tourists, which included a handful of US and European nationals, to raise awareness about the oil spillage, according to local media. The chief of indigenous group confirmed the agreement to local media group RPP. Hundreds of protesters took to the streets in Amman on Friday in a show of solidarity with Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. The protest was also organized to deny the Balfour Declaration, Britain's 105-year-old promise to Zionists to create a Jewish home in Palestine. About 800 protesters chanted slogans against Zionists and praised the Palestinian resistance to Zionist occupation. 4 days after Brazilian presidential election, supporters of Bolsonaro remain in the streets protesting and calling for the military to step in to avoid the leftist government of President-elect Lula da Silva. Hundreds stood outside the Rio de Janeiro's Eastern Military Command building on Thursday, days after the electoral authorities declared a nail-biting victory for former leftist President da Silva over far-right incumbent Bolsonaro. Pope Francis held an ecumenical meeting and prayers for peace at Our Lady of Arabia Cathedral in Bahrain on Friday. On his first full day in the Middle Eastern state, Francis held the service at the largest church on the Arabian Peninsula and one of the two churches serving Bahrain's Catholic community of about 160,000 people.
Twitter laid off employees in departments across the company in a severe round of cost-cutting. Those who are losing their jobs will receive a message to their personal email address, while employees staying on will get an email to their work account. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us. For more updates, you can follow our social media platform as well as L24 official website. For now, good night.